You're watching I-24 News. I'm Eli Roberts in Tel Aviv with the top stories at this hour. Multiple suicide bombers attempted to strike the southern Syrian city of al-Suwaida on Wednesday morning. One bomber was successful, detonating his bomb. Two more allegedly shot by Syrian forces before they could. At least 50 people dead, 78 wounded. There are likely many more casualties. The Islamic State did claim responsibility for the attack. We will continue to update you as we learn more about this developing story. And I-24 News is learning that Israeli officials have met 3 times with Syrian military leaders to discuss how Syrian government forces will return to their positions in southern Syria. Those talks mediated by the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force and Russian officials. The revelation of the talks comes after Israel shot down a Syrian fighter jet. Israel says it was flying in Israeli airspace. Syria says it was carrying out an operation against jihadists in Syrian territory. A Syrian official says it will react soon enough to the downing of the jet. And let's go live to I-24's defense correspondent Daniel Tzemach, who is standing by in Israel's north. And Daniel, you are just a short distance away from the fighting in Syria. Can you hear anything? Do you see anything? What is the situation behind you?
It's a very active situation, Eli, and that's to say the least. We've been hearing explosions and seeing explosions for the past few hours. The fighting on the other side has certainly intensified in the past few hours. Some speculate that it's actually because of a response, if you will, to those suicide bombings that you mentioned earlier. The Assad regime has also been undergoing an offensive in this region, trying to really clear out the last remaining ISIS presence in that southwestern corner. If we'll actually show you here what it looks like on the border right now. Explosions have been ringing out for the better part of the past 2 hours here, sporadically, but it's happening quite frequently in different areas in different regions. Mainly what we're hearing, it sounds like, are airstrikes, but certainly also artillery fire. And just to remind our viewers, the ongoing offensive is actually not only being taken by the Assad regime, but also Russian forces and even the Russian Air Force via airstrikes. Something that's definitely been heating up again in the past few hours. Right now, there might be a lull, but in the next coming minutes, it could easily pick up again. For now, the Israeli military also paying close attention to the events that are ongoing behind us. As you said, it's quite close proximity, and that buffer zone is of utmost importance as far as Israel is concerned. That 1974 agreement establishing a demilitarized zone between where we're standing and very close to where that fighting is still raging on.
Yeah, and it is very close indeed. For our viewers who don't know, Israel does share a border with Syria, and much of the fighting that is going on right now is in southern Syria, which is just north of Israel. So you have a really strong vantage point from where you are. Daniel, I want you to talk about one other thing, and that is the Israeli military shooting down that Syrian fighter jet. Syria says we can expect a response, quote, soon enough. What are we expecting?
Well, that's an important word term there. Soon enough. Soon enough, maybe because they're very preoccupied right now with ridding out those last remaining rebel strongholds. The main one that they're focusing on right now is right behind us near the Dara province. Israel struck down that Syrian fighter jet, that Sukhoi fighter jet. It's a Russian-made jet, actually. And after it infiltrated into Israeli airspace, so as to really make it quite clear that as far as Israel is concerned, it will not tolerate even a centimeter of infringement into Israeli territory, and the second that something does infringe upon Israeli sovereignty, as far as the Israeli government is concerned, it will strike, and that's indeed what we saw. For now, the fighting over there is relatively contained. It's a short distance away, but a distance away nonetheless, and it doesn't seem as though there's been any sort of activity that has gotten close enough to prompt any sort of Israeli action. But the Israeli military is on high alert in the north. There will be increased aerial patrols. We have heard that. We've seen evidence of that on the ground as well. A lot of aerial activity on the Israeli side of the border, and certainly heightened armored brigade presence, tanks that are scattered throughout the Israeli side of the Syria border here. So definitely a tense situation, but on the Israeli side, for now, it's calm. Over there, obviously, not as much.
All right, Daniel, and it is just amazing that we can actually look back and see the fighting happening behind you. I don't know how many people have this kind of a vantage point, particularly on the other side where the fighting is, of course, going on. Daniel Tzemach reporting live for us from Israel's border with Syria. Thank you for that. We turn now to the United States, where Trump lawyer and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani pushing back after the release of one of those tapes from former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen. In the tape, President Trump and Michael Cohen discussing setting up a shell company that would be used to pay for the rights of former Playboy model Karen McDougal's life story. She and Trump allegedly had an affair some 10 years ago. In the tape, a discussion on whether to make the payment in cash happening in the conversation. Cohen saying that it should be done the legitimate way, while Trump allegedly claims that they should just pay cash. Trump's team denies he said he wanted to use cash, even though in the tape, that's exactly what it sounds like. His lawyer saying he meant to say, do not use cash, instead of what we heard, which is should use cash. That's what the tape sounds like. That point could prove significant as authorities investigate possible violation of campaign finance rules. The conversation happening just a short time before the 2016 presidential election. And senior international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman is tracking this story today. And Owen, how does this contradict what President Trump said and what his campaign said during the 2016 election before?
Well, Eli, this story broke in November 2016, and at the time, Hope Hicks, who was the campaign spokesperson, this was around the time of the election, of course, said that she had no knowledge of this, or more to the point, that we have no knowledge of this, we have no knowledge of the payment, and that there was no affair. By all accounts, according to this recording, that seems not to be true. We also have Rudy Giuliani on the president's legal team making a bit of a shifting claim, saying that the recording shows that Donald Trump did not know about this situation until this conversation. Seems to be some indication in the tape that that's not quite true.
Okay, one thing I want to point out is the timing, because we've just had that huge controversy in the States where President Trump made the comments next to Russian President Vladimir Putin and then came and pushed back on that issue. Is what we're hearing today possibly a distraction to the sideshow that's going on in this investigation into possible Russian meddling in the 2016 election?
Well, look, Eli, that's not how it's being viewed in U.S. media. The way it's being viewed in U.S. media is that other things that the president has been doing over the past few days are in fact distractions, but that the Cohen tapes and the Cohen story is actually part of the main event. Why? Number one, it's potentially embarrassing to the president. Again, we just talked a second ago about how it contradicts claims that the president and his campaign made 2 years ago. So on its own terms, it's embarrassing. And also, of course, this may become connected to the Russia story. Michael Cohen was the president's confidant, not only on this issue of payments to women, but potentially also on connections or alleged connections between the campaign or even the president himself and Russian actors. Again, the question is, what does Michael Cohen know, and when and to whom is he going to tell it?
So we're back to this double negative defense. I meant to say that, but this is what I actually said. Owen Alterman, thank you for that analysis. We're going to stay in the United States, where the U.S. and Mexico, along with Canada, will return to the negotiation table on Thursday to talk about ways to revamp the North American Free Trade Agreement. President Trump saying that a renegotiation will lead to higher wages for Americans. Trump also putting pressure on a new NAFTA deal to happen quickly. The incoming foreign minister for Mexican President-elect Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador outlining some of the elements that his government would like to see in a new NAFTA agreement. And in Georgia, a state lawmaker who dropped his pants and repeatedly used racial slurs when prompted by one of Sacha Baron Cohen's characters just announced he will resign. Republican Jason Spencer will step down at the end of the month. One of Cohen's characters on his new show is a super macho racist Mossad agent named Iran Morad. It seems to be an obviously gross caricature, but lawmakers and politicians keep falling for it. In this weekend's episode, Spencer happily agreed to use racial slurs, take off his pants, and take disgusting pictures.
Go.
Also, the Islamic State having a very busy week. IS claimed that the attack that happened in Toronto on Sunday night was their work. 2 people were killed and 13 injured when a man opened fire on the street, gunning people down. And to Greece, where the country continues to reel with the most severe wildfires it has seen in recent years. The resort town of Mati, just a few miles outside of Athens, struck hard. Many people caught off guard by just how quick those flames can spread. People caught in the blaze fled to the ocean nearby. It was the only place they could go. 700 people rescued from the water, at least 79 dead, many more missing. The Prime Minister calling for 3 days of mourning as the country goes through this ravage. Stay tuned, there is still much more news still to come.